Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.
All right, welcome back to Bible Answers. I am your host, Dr. Al Garza. Today we're going to be discussing Psalm 110. Basically, my interpretation, my understanding of Psalm 110 in relation to Messianic prophecy and in reference to how Jesus quotes it in Matthew 22 in reference to himself. Now, the controversy or the debate comes in verse 1 of 110 in regards to the term used as Adoni in the traditional vowel pointing of the Masoretic text in the Hebrew scriptures, or as some English translations and other commentaries by Trinitarians, the word Adonai. Verse 1, of course, referring to the Lord, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, speaking to either Adoni or Adonai. David is either referencing Adoni, my Lord, as my master, or is he really using Adonai, but was it changed or misvowel pointed in the Hebrew Masoretic scriptures? Now we're going to talk about that tradition as well as outside Jewish sources regarding this passage. We're going to look at some of the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts to affirm the position of the Messiah in relation to Psalm 110 and its use of Adonai, or even how Adoni is used. So again, let's take a look at Psalm 110. I'm going to give you my understanding, my interpretation, and you might be surprised at some of the things I'm going to show you about Psalm 110 and some other things from Jewish sources and from the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts themselves. So let's get started in this PowerPoint presentation. All right, so let's take a look at the very first verse of Psalm 110. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Now you can see that the L there for Lord is a small l. This is because the Jewish scribes around the 9th to 10th century, when they were writing out the Hebrew Masoretic text or the Hebrew scriptures, which is referred to as the Masoretic text that we use today, about almost 1,000 years after Yeshua Jesus, they would put the vowel pointings underneath each Hebrew letter so that we can pronounce it correctly and also use the right words and the right meanings behind these words. So in this case, they put Adoni, my master, in verse 1. So Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh says to my Lord, Adoni, my master, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Now this is a psalm by David, which is David saying that the Lord is speaking to his Lord, my Adoni, my master. But as you can see above, the Hebrew doesn't have any markings or any vowel points. That's exactly how it would have been seen or read by the Jews or by Yeshua Jesus during the Second Temple period, and at least prior to the Masoretic text being written about 800, 900 years after Yeshua Jesus. So you see there that is Adoni that is being understood by the Jews in Psalm 110 verse 1. But if we look at verse 5, we see my Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. Now this is, according to the Jews and the vowel pointing, Adonai, literally the plural form of Adoni, my lords, or it's actually a substitute name for the divine name, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, directly. So if we don't want to use the divine name, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Jews would say Adonai. It's the plural form, my lords. Now I don't want to get into how the Jews understood my lords and the so-called plural of majesty, which is a later Jewish adaptation or a later adoption of the Jews into the Hebrew scriptures. But we do see my Lord, plural, Adonai, in verse 5. Now, as you can see in the red of the Hebrew, they're both spelled the same, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yod. The only way you can make a distinction between Adoni and Adonai is by putting the vowel pointings, which again comes almost 1,000 years after Yeshua Jesus. But it was a tradition of the Jews that this is how they understood Psalm 110, that verse 1 is Adoni, while verse 5 is Adonai. And we're going to see the connection between both, because it's important to look at everything in its context. But for this purpose here, we see that both are spelled the same, But yet with the vowel pointing is the only way you're going to make a distinction between Adoni and Adonai. Adoni is singular, my master, my ruler, a title for humans or kings and rulers. And Adonai, plural, my lords, is the substitute name of God that Jews use instead of pronouncing his name. So let's take a look again. We're going to look at the context. We're going to look at other things regarding how we should understand Psalm 110. Now let's take a look at Matthew 22 in context. Now while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them a question, saying, "What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." He said to them, "How is it then that David in the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. If then David calls him Lord, how is he his son?" And no one is able to answer him a word, nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions. Matthew 22, verses 41 through 46. Now, this is interesting because David in the Spirit calls him Lord. The tradition, of course, is Adoni, and Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Adoni, my Lord, sit at my right hand. Now, yes, the Hebrew Matthew manuscripts agree with Adoni, my Lord. But that's not what the question is in regards to. Not whether it is Adoni, but who is the Messiah the son of? Is he just the son of David, which would make him just a human being, a regular man, which majority of non-Trinitarians and Unitarians agree that he's just a human? Or is he more than that? Because if he really truly existed prior to this part in Matthew, before he became flesh as Messiah, then David is speaking to someone as his Lord, and God is speaking to someone there next to him. This is not prophetic. This is not speaking prophetically about a non-existent person who will soon come to be. But what Jesus is saying here, if he is just the son of David and that's it, how can David refer to him in Psalm 110 if he really wasn't there? So if he existed prior to David, then he's more than just the son of David. That's the only other explanation or interpretation we can get of Matthew 22. This is why Jesus challenges them and says, if that is the case, if that's true, then how does David in the Spirit call him Lord, Adoni, saying, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to my Adoni, sit at my right hand. This is the Messianic. Jesus saying they're speaking of him as the Messiah, and David is referring to the Messiah who's there and who the Lord himself is speaking to. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is speaking to the Messiah, as David says, my master, my Lord. So it's not about the title, but it's about the existence, about the superiority that the Messiah holds, even greater than David, because David refers to the Messiah and that the Lord is speaking to as my Lord Adoni. So there's no question that the Hebrew manuscripts agree with Adoni, my Lord, that the Jews writing Matthew writing Matthew, if it's a copy, and we're going down all the way back to Matthew from the scribes, that they are understanding this as being Adoni. So that's not in dispute. The part that I am challenging here is the context, the meaning, the understanding of that Jesus is challenging them that he is more, that the Messiah is more than just the son of David, a human being. That David cannot be referencing any other person other than Messiah pre-existing, as we're going to see how in the next slides, as well as the Lord speaking to someone. He's not speaking to himself or someone who's not there, and David is not speaking about someone who isn't there as well. So either the Messiah existed prior to David with the Lord himself, or he is just a mere man and mortal, as the Pharisees believed and as most non-Trinitarians and Unitarians believe, that he's just the son of David. But let's see what other evidence we can look at to support what I just presented here regarding the pre-existence of Messiah, as well as these titles. Let's take a look. All right, so let's take a look at a Jewish source and see exactly how Psalm 110 is understood. The Targum is an Aramaic Jewish commentary of the Hebrew Scriptures. What that means is that the Jews, when they translated the Hebrew Scriptures into Aramaic, they didn't do it traditionally word for word. They did it as a commentary or as a paraphrase. This is why the Jews in the local synagogues during the time of Yeshua Jesus and during the Second Temple period and before would read the Hebrew scriptures and then proceed to read the Targum or the Aramaic translation in order to get a better understanding. So a Targum kind of puts into perspective what the Hebrew's trying to say. And in Psalm 110, we have this phrase, Amar Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh Be-Memra, and that is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh says, at his word, with his word, and through his word. Now, the reason we have all three is because the bet there in yellow, the Hebrew letter, acts as a prefix for at, with, or through. And of course, the red is the memra, the word. Now, this is important because in the Hebrew, it is Adoni, my master. But according to the Aramaic Jewish commentary, the Targum, it is the Lord says to his word, or says at his word, with his word, through his word. And it's David as referring to Adoni. It is the word who is present there. This is why we looked at Matthew 22 and its context of being that Jesus was challenging the Pharisees that he existed, the Messiah existed as the word, which we will see in John 1:1. He existed as the word, the memra. This is why all throughout the Aramaic Jewish commentary passages about creation, you'll see the word memra put there for the divine name, substituted there. It was the memra, the word who created man and woman, who created in Genesis 1:1. All throughout the Torah and the rest of the writings, memra, the word, is present and active as God himself, as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So we see here in Psalm 110, the Aramaic is telling us the same thing, that this is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh who is saying at, with, and through his word about sitting at his right hand. So this is why it's important, because we're going to see very clearly how John 1:1 brings this together with the memra, the word, and how the Jews would have understood this, and how Yeshua Jesus himself in Matthew 22 challenging the Pharisees that he existed as the word in Psalm 110, not just as Adoni the Messiah, as my master, but as the word himself who then becomes flesh. And just a point of reference here, Paul references the Aramaic Targum to Timothy at 2 Timothy 3:8 by naming Jannes and Jambres. I'm using the English translation pronunciation here, in Exodus 7:11. Those names only appear in the Aramaic. They don't appear in the Hebrew scriptures. So Paul himself gives some credence and authority to the Targum when he references those names only found in the Aramaic commentary of Exodus 7:1. You can look this up online for yourself, or if you have the Targum of Exodus, you can see that those names are only present there in the Aramaic. So Paul gives authority to the Aramaic. The word is the one who existed in the Aramaic Jewish commentary of Psalm 110, who is also Adoni, and is also Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh himself, all throughout the Jewish commentaries of the Aramaic translation. So let's continue on and see what other piece of evidence we can point to show that Psalm 110 is not only messianic, but is also speaking of Adonai and the Lord himself, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now let's take a look at the Gospel of John from the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts. We have a number of different Hebrew New Testament manuscripts of the Gospel of John. I believe between 8 and 9 manuscripts. Now, some of these are complete Gospels of John. There's a few of them that are, and some of them are only the first 6 chapters or the first few chapters, or just part of the first chapter. But when we can bring them together, we can see a consistency of understanding of what the New Testament Hebrew Gospel of John was trying to say to a Jewish audience. Now, these are manuscripts written by different Jewish scribal hands during different time periods, independently being written. And when you bring them together, this is how you begin to understand the Gospel of John from the Hebrew. In the beginning, he was the Word, and the Word was with and next to God. And the Word, he was God. This one, he was with and next to God in the beginning. Everything was made by his hands, and the Word became flesh. Now, some manuscripts read the God. He was the God. Another manuscript reads, and God became flesh. So these Hebrew New Testament manuscripts of the Gospel of John, when brought together, gives us a really good understanding of what the Jews would have understood during the time of Yeshua Jesus about the Word. The same word we just saw in the Aramaic commentary of the Targum of Psalm 110, where the Lord is speaking to his word, at his word, with his word, through his word, who David refers to as his master, whom the Messiah, Yeshua Jesus, in Matthew 22 says that I cannot be just the son of David because I was there in Psalm 110, that David is referring to me as the Memra, the word, in the Hebrew and Aramaic. And this Gospel of John in Hebrew gives us more insight to the understanding of how the Jews understood, and not only Psalm 110, but the other passages in the Hebrew Old Testament regarding the Memra, that he was with and next to God, that he was there from the beginning. He was the God, and it was God and the Word who became flesh. This is very strong now that we have Hebrew New Testament manuscripts. We have about just over 4,000 of them, and we do have more that haven't been scanned, but they have been cataloged. So we need to understand this is important in connection to how we understand Psalm 110, specifically from the Aramaic. Now, what else can we see in regards to more evidence about Psalm 110 in regards to Adonai and Adoni, the Memra? Let's continue. Now let's take a look at the Messiah in Psalm 110 verses 1, 2, 4, and 5 in context with everything we just learned. This is important in regards to how we should read Psalm 110 with everything we just went through with the Targum, the Hebrew Gospel of John, what Yeshua says. This is going to bring it all together. This is how it should read or be understood to what we should be reading and understanding from it. Yod Heh says to my Lord, singular, my master, which is referring to the Word and Messiah, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Yod Heh will stretch forth your strong scepter from Zion, referring to the Messiah. Messiah's strong scepter from Zion, saying, rule in the midst of your enemies. You, Messiah, are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek, which we see in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews and other places. And of course, my Lord, plural, Adonai, literally my Lord's, Messiah is at your right hand. Your Yod Heh, your right hand, Yod Heh, referring back to verse 1. He will shatter kings in the day of his wrath. And the Aramaic Targum uses Yod Heh for the plural Adonai. So if you look at the Targum, it doesn't say my Lord Adonai, plural, as you would see. In verse 5, it would refer to as the tetragrammaton, the name Yod Heh, is at your right hand. Again, this is clear from what we just seen that the Word and Messiah and Adonai is in Psalm 110 in reference to Jesus when he comes to Matthew 22 and challenges them this, because they would have understood what is being said by Jesus in Matthew 22, that he's not just the son of David, that he was in Psalm 110, that David is speaking not only to him but about him, and it is the Lord Yod Heh who is speaking to the Word and the Messiah. It is the Word and Messiah who sits at the right hand, my right hand according to God, and it is the Messiah and Adonai who is at your right hand, Yod Heh. Think of it this way. You will never see in the New Testament God the Father sitting or standing in anybody's right side or at anybody's right hand. It is always the Messiah, all through the Gospels, Acts, and even in the letters and the epistles. It is the Messiah, Yeshua Jesus, at the right hand, sitting and standing. Never the opposite. Never the Father or the Lord God at anybody's right hand other than the Messiah, who is the Word and of course is Adonai and a distinct person. So this is why we need to understand Psalm 110 this way in which we put everything together. This is how Psalm 110 should be understood when reading. Now, this might be hard for a lot of people to understand. I would say go over this PowerPoint presentation again. We're going to end with a conclusion of what we just learned. But this is how Psalm 110 should read. As we just brought all the sources together from the Targum, the Hebrew New Testament, Gospel of John, Matthew 22, and so forth. it is verse 1 and 5 that show that the Messiah and Jesus is my Lord, Adoni. It is also Adonai, who is not only at my right hand, says Yod-Heh-Vav, but is at your right hand, Yod-Heh-Vav. The same person is Adoni and Adonai, and also the Word, the Memra, and the Messiah according to Yeshua Jesus in Matthew 22. So let's look at the conclusion of what everything we just learned and how we fully understand Psalm 110. So let's look at our conclusion of Psalm 110 after going through all the evidence of the Targum, the Hebrew New Testament Gospel of John, through Matthew 22, and of course looking at Psalm 110 from the Hebrew. We can conclude the following. 1. The word Adonai and Adoni are spelled the same in Hebrew. Only with the vowel pointings can you tell them apart, and both mean my Lord and my Lord's plural. So we have my Lord singular and my Lord plural. The my Lord plural is Adonai, and of course can be changed to a singular if the verb preceding it is a singular or a modifier. And of course my Lord singular is Adoni. So that's how do we tell them apart? By the vowel pointings. That's the only way, because they are spelled exactly the same. And they both mean my Lord. One is singular, one is plural, but the plural can be singular with a modified verb. Also, Jesus quotes Psalm 110 as a messianic chapter referring to his pre-existence. Not only as Adoni, but as Adonai and as the Memra, the word that we had just seen earlier in the slide. 3. The Aramaic Targum of Psalm 110 refers to the word that Yod-Heh-Vav is speaking at, with, and through, while affirming Yod-Heh-Vav is Adonai in verse 5. And Paul affirms the authority of the Targum in, of course, 2 Timothy. So we have Paul's usage of the Targum, which confirms the authority, and of course the Targum itself puts, of course, the word that Yod-Heh-Vav is speaking at, with, and through. And also verse 5 as Adonai. Number 4, the Hebrew of John 1, 1 through 3 with verse 14 confirms the Aramaic Targum as Jesus, who is the Word and God, who made everything by his hands and who became flesh. And then of course number 5, Psalm 110 in context affirms the Messiah Jesus as Master, Lord, and Yod-Heh-Vav. So it affirms him as Adoni, Adonai, and as Yod-Heh-Vav. When you bring all this together, that's the final conclusion of Psalm 110 in context. It affirms all of it. It's not just Adonai, it's not just Adoni, but it's also Adonai and the Word and, of course, Yod-Heh-Vav. So that's how we understand Psalm 110 when you bring all the sources together and you just don't read one source. If you just read the Hebrew and that's it, and you don't do what the Jews did, look at the Targum, look at other references, the other sources. We have the Gospel of John in Hebrew, we have the words of Yeshua Jesus. This is how we conclude Psalm 110, exactly as it shows here. So I really hope this helps to give you my understanding, my point of view, my interpretation of Psalm 110, because this is what needs to be discussed and talked about, not just one or two words or one verse from Psalm 110. You must collectively put all the evidence together and draw a conclusion. So I hope this really helps your understanding of Psalm 110. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them here. And again, I want to thank my supporters who are helping with donations monthly and weekly as partners to help bring the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts into translation into English translation. So we can actually see the insight of what's being meant from the Hebrew perspective, not just Greek and Latin, and also other translations as well. So leave a comment if you have any questions. I'm glad to answer them, or you can email me. But I want to say again, thank you for watching and tuning in. Please like and share and follow. And again, this is Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza. Have a wonderful day and blessings.
Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.